What's happening, Bigger Pockets? This is Matt Faircloth. So today we're going to talk about legal fees. And attorneys are all over real estate. They are a necessary being. I don't want to say necessary evil because they're not. They're just necessary, people to work in the real estate business. They could be representing your lender. They could be representing you. They could be representing a seller, whatever it is. So lawyers are necessary folks to work in the real estate business because it's a complicated business. There's a lot of ramifications that come along with contracts and with buying property, and it's a lot of money that flows around. So it makes sense to have attorneys involved in real estate transactions. So that's for my attorney friends out there that I'm not trying to say in this video that attorneys are unnecessary. What I am want to talk about today is keeping the legal fees you get charged as investors in check and just making sure that you're on top of them, keeping them at a reasonable rate. And here's why what inspired this video is we just bought a 198 unit apartment complex in North Carolina, and on that deal we ended up getting hit with higher legal fees than I thought we were going to. It's like the day before closing, both attorneys sent in their legal bills. That's the attorney for the lender and the attorney for us sent in their legal bill to the closer, and I almost fell out of my chair. And I was able to get them, down a little bit and renegotiated, but it brought up a conversation I wanted to have with you guys about legal, right? So first of all, here's what your attorney should be doing. So if you have an attorney, and we'll talk about the banks. I'll just briefly, the bank that lends you money, if you're borrowing any more than say maybe $500,000-$600,000, if you're doing a larger deal, it's more than say $500,000. Odds are your bank is going to make you pay them to hire a lawyer to write up the loan agreements. Okay, that's called the bank's attorney. And so I've never seen anybody be able to skirt around that. It is a necessary evil. What happens is if you're borrowing less than that kind of money, the bank just uses boilerplate loan documents and drops in your information. But for larger deals, they want to make sure they're protected, so they hire a lawyer. And that lawyer goes and writes up the loan documents, reads through title, reads through everything that has to happen for the deal, and represents the bank on the transaction to make sure the bank's interests are protected. The borrower that's borrowing money has to pay that legal fee. Okay, so we'll talk about how to mitigate that one in a second, but let's talk about your lawyer. Okay, so when you guys hire a lawyer for the purchase, sales is a whole different thing for selling property, but for purchasing real estate, there's a lot more that goes on, and most people that end up purchase anything of significant value end up having to hire an attorney. So here's what you ought to have an attorney do for you, right? They should be reviewing the contract. Okay. Now, don't let them spend too much time on that. They're going to want to, write a whole new contract, and they love to go back and forth and haggle, especially if your seller has an attorney and you're a buyer, then they'll burn a lot of money just going back and forth and haggling over some sentence in the contract and might spend hours going back and forth over stuff in that. So don't let your attorney spend too much time here. If you can, use a standard contract, like a standard agreement of sale or something that's been used before, something boilerplate that's robust enough to cover your interest, and then have your attorney then add on to that to cover anything that's more specific to the property. The next thing that they're going to do is they're going to, anything with regards to zoning, anything with regards to surveying, anything with regards to S-U-R-V-E-Y. There you go. I learned how to spell. Zoning, survey, local town. That may or may not happen. Anything with regarding to local representation, it pays to have an attorney that's local to your project. Some states, the building we bought in North Carolina, you had to have somebody not only in state, but it just makes more sense to have the person in the county you're buying the property. That it made sense for us to have an attorney there. So you want to have somebody somewhat local, because if you want a town question, they can make a phone call for you. They can look into certain things local for you. Just, again, this is another be careful area that they could burn a lot of time. The one thing you want to have them spend some time on is on this one and this one. So if you have to have a survey, you want to have them review that survey briefly to make sure it got done properly, and you want to have them make sure that your property's zoned in the correct town, because every town has different zoning. You got to have somebody with local knowledge that knows the local zoning codes, maybe even knows the zoning officer, can call them for you and everything like that. But they shouldn't be spending more than an hour or two doing these two things for you. Okay. Then there's other title stuff. I'll just put title. Now, your closing agent and your title company should be doing a lot of this for you. Don't let your attorney spend too much time reviewing the title report and going through line by line, because those title reports are really long. It shows all the different chain of ownership, shows all the different backgrounds for the buyer and the seller. And so I would rely more on your title company than on a lawyer on this thing, because the lawyer really can't do much. They can just offer up their opinion and spend your money reading the title report. So if you have a title agent that's issuing title insurance, have them do this, okay? And then the next thing that the lawyer can do, and this is probably where most of my money went on this last transaction in North Carolina, and this is reviewing the loan docs. Okay, the loan documents are something that's issued by your bank. Now this is a bigger transaction, so the loan docs were like, this thick. And so there was a lot of modifications to the loan docs that my guy thought needed to happen. But at the end of the day, these are pretty much boilerplate loan documents that are generated by the bank, even though I had to pay their attorney to generate them. Attorneys can spend a lot of time reviewing documents. And if you go and give them, like no joke, like 400 or 500 pages worth of paperwork to read, they will do it and they will read it and they will charge you their hourly rate for reading through all that paperwork, and then also offering up changes to the loan docs that need to happen and everything like that. So you really want to minimize this, okay? But you want them to do it. But at the end of the day, I have found that they end up spinning their wheels a lot on these things, and the banks aren't going to change the loan documents too much. They'll offer small modifications, but don't let your attorney go burning like mine did, like maybe 15, 20 hours or more going through loan documents, okay? So here are some tips for lawyers, okay? First of all, you want to, this is what they do for purchasing a property. Now here's some tips on how you keep the fees in check when you hire an attorney and they do they represent you on a transaction. Number one, you want to know their hourly rate. Okay. Now, they're probably going to disclose that in an engagement agreement with you to tell you what it is. But remember, everything's negotiable. So if they hit you with some really high rate that seems a little high to you, you want to ask them if that's negotiable. And then you want to see if you can get them down to a fixed rate. Now, they may hate doing this. They may want to pad themselves, but it's nice to at least know going in that this transaction is going to cost me X through a lawyer. And then just be really clear what they're going to do, because the other thing that they'll try and do is what my lawyer ended up doing. He had a certain defined scope of work that he was going to do for a flat rate, and then anything he would do above and beyond that scope of work was going to get charged by the hour. So he gladly charged me a flat rate, and then he charged me hourly on top of that, okay? Because we weren't clear on when he was doing things outside the scope and when he was doing things inside the scope, and he hit me with the bill the day before closing, so there really wasn't much time to renegotiate. I got him down a little bit, but it really wasn't much time to get him to drop. So that leads me to my next point, which is you get them to regularly disclose how much time they put in. Regularly disclose fees. Okay. So at the end of the day, that's an important thing you want to know. So as time goes on, you want to know, like, hey, have you put in how many, 10, 15, 30 hours, 45 hours? What have you put in so far at this hourly rate you already told me about? So at the end of the day, what you want them to tell you. Like my guy was supposed to send me monthly invoices, debatable whether or not he did. We certainly didn't get a review on those, right? But you want them to regularly disclose their fees to you on as things build up. Had my guy done this, to regularly disclose how much he had built up, I wouldn't have gotten blindsided the day before closing, realizing that we owed this guy quite a bit of money, right? So that's one thing. Now, do what you can yourself. Now, I could have done this myself. I could have put my title agent to do this. I could have done some of this loan doc review myself, and I just, again, could have done some of these things on my own, and I did. But my advice to you guys is do whatever you can on your own, because your lawyer's going to charge you that hourly rate for any time they lift their finger. They're going to. Oh, I'll give you a good example. Finish writing this. Do what you can yourself. The bank set up a weekly conference call. It was a 1-hour conference call every week, okay, to talk about the progression of the deal. Now, I thought it was important to have my attorney on the phone, not realizing that, I guess I did realize, but just not doing the math in my head on how much this was adding up, because he would bill me for a half an hour to prepare for the call, the hour on the call, and a half an hour to type up notes from the call for himself and everything like that. So I was getting dinged for 2 hours every time there was a 1 hour conference call every week, right? What? So it added up, right? So do what you can yourself. There's no reason he needed to be on that call, right? I could have taken notes. I could have just popped him an email, said, hey man, this is what they said, just so you know. This is what I need you to do, right? I could have done that. And I would have gladly done that to avoid not paying 2 hours of his time every time we had to pick up the phone and talk. So, checking on costs, close fees, flat fee, okay, hourly rate, I believe that's it. Just on this fixed rate, this is probably my biggest recommendation, is to say, okay, I'm going to buy this property over here. I want you to do all these things. I want you to give me a flat rate, okay? And the other thing I didn't do on this deal was on the fixed rate side, I didn't negotiate hard enough with the bank on what their lender fees were. I just accepted it. So my recommendation to you guys is when a bank tells you they're going to hire a third-party lawyer, number one, get disclosure on those fees. To get them to tell you how much is exactly to the dollar is that going to cost me, or give me a not to exceed, right? Sometimes they do that. They'll give you an hourly rate with a not to exceed. Just say, well, it's going to be by the hour, but we won't bill you any more than this number, okay? Or we'll let you know if we approach that number. So do that with your bank, see if you can get them to do a fixed rate or a not to exceed, or something to try and put a reservation on the fees, and obviously get them to disclose their fees regularly, okay? Not the day before closing, like it happened to us. I mean, it was still a great deal and all that, but they came in a couple of % higher than they should have, but we didn't have time to renegotiate it. So anyway. That's it, guys. Again, lawyers are absolutely necessary in the real estate business. You have to have them, and because they're good. They know what they're talking about. They do great work for us. But because of the rate that they charge, and because of how expensive they can be, you really want to just compartmentalize how much work they do for you, because they're going to be charging that rate, and especially if there's stuff you could be doing yourself. And that it really helps to keep legal fees down and keep them predictable too. So that's it. I'd love to hear from my attorney friends that are watching. So please leave a comment, and don't think I tried to slam you. I didn't. Leave a comment, and we can talk about keeping legal fees down for all you investors that have had some success doing that too, or maybe share some horror stories on legal fees getting squirrely on you as they did on us for this deal. But we're still doing really well. It was just outside of our expectations. So anyway, that's that. And as I always say, guys, thanks for watching and have a great and profitable week.